Good morning and welcome to Seinfeld. This morning's discussion will focus on the Bris. So for those in the room, for those around our table, what did you observe? What is it that you want to talk about this morning?
At least for me, like one of the first things I saw in the episode was when Kramer tried to find the room number and like put a couple digits, so maybe like dyslexia potentially.
Interesting. That's an interesting take on it. I can't dismiss that. And a couple of comments towards that. One is this condition of dyslexia is, I believe, now published in the child and adolescent section of the DSM, which unfortunately for discussion and educational purposes, I'm going to have to table, right? So the group here will get a lot of exposure to child and adolescent psychiatry through working with Dr. Ilaria. Given my background and my ego strength in that I am ignorant about issues pertaining to children and adolescents, I'll identify that disorder. We understand where it's published in terms of our diagnostic manual, but unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to teach more on the subject, at least this morning. A couple of other points too, it's great that this conversation is coming up your first day on service in terms of this particular didactic. When we watch films or we have different Seinfeld episodes that are assigned to us, we're going to discuss them from an educational perspective. And I think especially folks listening on Instagram and other social media platforms might draw the conclusions that groups that Robert would tend to pathologize behavior. So this is for educational purposes only. And as a clinical pearl, if someone were to present like this, I will ask that you always address or approach the situation in that it's completely normal. And only after evidence is presented to you to the contrary, do you move off point one and begin to consider that this might be due to a mental disorder, right? So this is a great example of that. And it's great that this comes up really in our initial discussion for a new rotation. And then one final thing, hypothetically, if you observe this behavior and it turns out that it is recurrent and it is resulting in clinically significant distress or impairment in Kramer or others, we're on our way to point number two, right? We're there at step number two. In addition to dyslexia, an adult Kramer presents with the information provided you in this movie, or excuse me, in this episode. What is your differential? What's one of the things that you might, let's say you uncover this repositioning as part of a routine mental status exam. What would your expanded differential include here? And let's say when you did serial sevens and you asked them to start at 100 and subtract 7. And by the way, when you do this, you ask them to simply subtract 7 from 100. And when they say 14, you stop, right? And you alternatively ask them to spell world or a 5-letter word. However, if they get 93 correct, you pause and you reframe and say, okay, from 93, can you continue to subtract 7 until I ask you to stop? And then you do what most of us find to be very, very difficult, and among the most difficult tasks as a doctor, you say nothing. What you're looking for is whether the individual gets 5 consecutive responses correctly before they get 2 back-to-back incorrect. Which comes first? Because a person of normal intelligence, average intelligence, will be able to get 5 consecutive responses correct. When they get one wrong, you just restart, right? You're starting from that, now count. Are they going to get 5 consecutive correct, right? So that's serial sevens, and that's testing concentration. And let's say that they give you approximate answers. So they don't say 93, but 92. Right? And they go right down, always one away from the correct answer. And that's also part of the evaluation and added to the information that you observed. Differential. So on a
describing like IQ testing in a lot of ways, because when you look at like digit span and arithmetic, that's like one section, usually looking at like working memory. Because there could be some deficits in like processing working memory.
And it's that's not to go off too much on a tangent, but I do need to make this statement. When you review the recording on the mental status exam, 90% of the adult, well, the mental status exam is actually pulled from the IQ test, the Wechsler, right? They're one and the same. So it's nice, and the PowerPoint for you and the recording that's up for you to intercession or whenever you're gonna get those recordings. Slide after slide is actually pulled from the Wechsler. They're the exact questions from the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, the WACE or the WACE R or whatever version it is. So you should know the background as to where these questions come from. Ultimately, they come from IQ testing. So that's a good point. Others in the differential? So this was once referred to as the syndrome of inapproximate answers, or I'm sorry, approximate answers. I had an extra syllable there. And this particular syndrome found its way in multiple chapters of the DSM over the years. It's now considered to be malingering, although that in itself is a clinical term that's also being phased out of the DSM. But the idea here is that the individual might be manipulating the situation. And if you remember the former name, prison psychosis, it's usually to avoid some kind of adverse outcome. So that's a consideration here. So I don't think Kramer is really providing information consistent with the syndrome of approximate answers. But it does open up the door to make that teaching point, and this particular syndrome, even malingering, can still show up in a shelf exam. So let's talk a little bit about this process called malingering, or previously referred to as malingering, a clinical term. This particular syndrome is usually identified when individuals present with signs and symptoms that physical exam and lab analysis does not support, right? When we see that mismatch, when an internist or a family practitioner sees this mismatch, psychiatry, this very office is likely to be called and asked for consultation. When that happens, what's one of the first things in the back of your mind that you as a clinician consider to assess?
Whether the person knows like that they're kind of faking their conditions or they actually believe this is going on in their life.
Exactly right. If they actually believe it, right? Then what does your differential include?
If they actually know this is happening and they're just like saying it for some external gain.
No, go in the other direction. You said if they actually believe it.
They actually believe it.
There's
I
no
think coverage. Is it called coverage?
That's exactly what it's
It
called.
could be like somatic symptoms related to something else.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yep. That's definitely the top two in your differential. You named them. Let's restate them. Conversion disorder, a somatic symptom disorder, right? And both of these conditions are published in the chapter titled somatic symptom and related disorders. So you have, again, somatic symptom disorder and related disorders, and our discussion begins with conversion as one of those related disorders. Again, an individual presents with signs and symptoms for which no underlying physiologic process can explain. And there is no, by the way, I want to form this in, I want to say this in the form of a question. How do you actually assess whether the patient is providing you misinformation? And the easy answer is this: it's a clinical pearl, but it's going to show up on exams too. And that is simply an absence of information that would reveal that they are misinforming you, right? The default is that they're telling you the truth, always. As being a patient-centered provider, patients are always telling the truth until there's evidence to the contrary. Right? Now, when the symptoms are a deficit in sensory or motor function, we call it conversion. When they're anything else, we call it somatic symptom disorder. Right? So in that way, conversion is just a variant. One example of somatic symptom disorder. Any questions about this proverbial column that we're talking about when the patient presents with no information supporting that they are misinforming you? All right, so let's say as your working hypothesis, your provisional diagnosis is conversion because of loss of right side function. Upon leaving the room, you realize you just left your stethoscope in that room. You return literally within 10 seconds later, and you see that person doing one-handed push-ups using that limb that they just, in physical exam and self-report, told you has power 0 out of 5. Evidence of the contrary is now front and center. And by the way, you talk to nursing who also in their medical record documentation has documented the same finding, right? Just an hour before on their shift. Now, what do you do? What's your differential here?
Lingering will probably be higher up.
Versus?
Um,
Oh, no, yeah, conversion, and I think for comprehensive discussion, yeah, I mean, conversion and somatic symptom disorder will remain under differential. They should be part of the formulation. But in that formulation, you should say that due to the discovery of information that is consistent with the patient misinforming, this practitioner, malingering and blank are higher now in the differential diagnosis. What will you fill that blank in with? A condition called factitious disorder. Factitious. So the next question is going to be what differentiates factitious from malingering, since both are syndromes of misinformation.
I think factitious is just like not for like external gain. It's more like the person enjoys the sake role or the attention.
We'll just say internal gain.
Yeah. Oh, internal gain.
Say internal gain. Often we hear the secondary gain. Yeah. Yep. And again, clinical pearl, but something that might in fact show up on a shelf exam is that in the absence of any information that demonstrates external gain, the gain must always be internal and internal only. Doesn't matter how you feel, doesn't matter what you think of the patient, that none of that matters. If you do not have evidence that there is anything that is externally motivating your patient's behavior, your patient's misinformation, then it is always internal and it is always factitious in some of other ways. That will be the default. Always give the patient benefit of the doubt. Any questions about this ultra brief primer on how to address the somatic symptom and related disorders? Again, somatic symptom disorder, and now 3 related disorders: conversion, factitious, malingering, and really in that order, right? In terms of index of suspicion. Questions? All right, so just a brief follow-up to this in terms of really summarizing. This took about 6 minutes. There is an hour-long PowerPoint for you on this subject on the Box account. Again, whether you watch it tonight and really crystallize this information, whether you would after the weekend, maybe after Halloween, or during your intercessions, up to you. One little perk in terms of watching it at or around the time of Halloween is that particular video, and I say this with a straight face, that is up on the Box account is said to be cursed. Anytime a medical student's ever watched it, a clown doll mysteriously appears in their house. Right? It's a little bit of an urban legend that Robert Wood, if you are a clown phobic, you must tell Kathy Knoll before watching this recording. Please don't look past this warning. All right. This urban legend has been going on since 2015. It's explained better on that recording, but once you get the explanation, have you seen The Ring? It's not 7 days, it's like 7 hours. Right. Now, when we used to have a more traditional curriculum outside of the intercession, this was given in person. There was fair warning. People who wanted to leave the room left the room. And those that stayed always had one potential victim that went home 4 o'clock that day to find the clown doll. So
I can attest that I've seen the clown doll before from other students.
oh yeah, it gets posted. Oh yeah, so you could check out the Twitter account. It's real. And it's been going on since 2015. Just aside, just be careful. Yeah. And again, if you're a clown phobic, you must tell Kathy Knoll. Or if you're not clown phobic and just don't like clowns, or them just mysteriously appearing in your apartment. Any questions about the somatic symptom related disorders? I don't know if APNs are excluded or protected, so don't give me that look. All right, so that's Kramer. Lot to talk about. We had half our session was taken up with Kramer. Any other characters from the Bris you want to discuss?
The Norfolk. What was happening?
What is happening?
He was so like aggressive, with like low insight and kind of like gaslighting everyone towards the end of like, well, you flinched, you flinched.
Mhm.
I don't know like diagnostically what was happening, but the whole interaction with the mobile and Jerry and everyone, which is very chaotic, leading to like a formed relationship for Kramer, which like we talked about how Kramer had a very hard time in form a relationship, and so he has two people who are willing to like have him hold their child and be their godfather.
Yes, yeah, that is.
I was
that's
a little off.
it's very odd.
I think the mobile, well, first off, he didn't want to be the mobile, he wanted to be a butcher, and that's unfortunately his reality. And so he kind of like just externalizing kind of like resentment in some ways, goes around him.
Anything else? What did you think of his character? How did he make you feel?
Anxious,
Okay.
like very unpredictable person.
Yeah.
It seems.
Yeah, and what might that countertransference be tapping into? The countertransference meaning the anxiety that this character instilled in you or conjured in you.
I think it's just like I don't know what's gonna happen next with him. He just doesn't seem to be a very stable person. And I feel like for people that are unpredictable, it's just like kind of scary, and you don't want to like be around them all the time, so you don't know what's gonna happen.
Give him a knife and a baby.
Exactly.
I mean, he struck me as being overtly anxious.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like externalizing his anxiety
Yeah.
to others, it was really.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, again, there were signs and symptoms at some points in this episode which were consistent with a panic attack. But inter-episode, there was an elevated threshold of anxiety even then. So even if we thought that this might be panic disorder, I do think there's still more to the discussion. And to the extent that, and we don't know this, although, again, I think the next step would be to discuss this part of it as well, but pertaining to his job, if in fact, during circumcisions or the Bris, the anxiety peaked, this may be performance anxiety, right? Which goes by the diagnosis of what on a 2023 shelf exam? Single best answer, social anxiety disorder, right? Social anxiety disorder, where the social situation or the performance itself invokes the anxiety. Now, there's a specifier, performance type only, which may or may not be true. We just don't know, right? We haven't seen this character outside of performing his job. Now, next part of the discussion is if Larry David were to write another episode, season 10, and his character reappeared, what's your gut say? He's no longer, let's say he's a butcher now. He actually meets his life stream. Do you think he'd be anxious?
I think it would be better.
You think he'd be better?
Yeah, because as he said, as for butchers, like none of the family of the animals will come to blame you if you make a mistake. So I feel like he would be calmer.
Only the question too, like, is the family watching the trigger for his performance anxiety? Like a butcher, you can get him back, right?
Yep. And if you're both correct in that follow-up, in that sequel, season 10, treating it like a patient follow-up. If a person comes to your office a year later, a month later, and is no longer in the situation that you feel contributed to, if not invoked in anxiety, and to your point, is better, then social anxiety disorder may have actually been the single best answer. And if not, then obviously you have to continue to formulate what might be going on. Right, so that's general sense of this particular character, and maybe it is social anxiety disorder. So, social anxiety disorder on shelf exams tends to present very similar to other anxiety disorders, and that is avoidance behavior. So, I want you to ignore, well, don't ignore, but don't really think there's a significant positive predictive value when that first sentence tells you a blank-year-old presents with avoidance behavior. Right, because that can certainly be social anxiety disorder, but could also be multiple other disorders within the anxiety disorder continuum. That includes the obsessive compulsive and related disorders, as well as the trauma and stressor related disorders. So very quickly in the differential are separation anxiety disorder and agoraphobia, right? If you're going to have A, B, C, and D, I almost guarantee you A, B, and C are going to be among those three, right? So what differentiates social anxiety, perhaps seen in this character, and agoraphobia? How would you rewrite that sequel in season 10 to allow for the formulation of agoraphobia now being the single best answer? So another way to state this is, while the clinical focus for separation anxiety, social anxiety disorder, is the social or performance situation itself, what is the fear in individuals who are battling agoraphobia? Why? That's right. Why?
If it was like unsafe or like
From what?
unfamiliar.
It's the fear of becoming embarrassed or debilitated in the case of blank, which is the reason why agoraphobia is usually comorbid with another condition like panic disorder, like Tourette's, like irritable bowel, right? So it's the fear that escape may not be possible without sincere embarrassment due to blank.
And to your question, it's how like different if it's agoraphobia. I wouldn't expect him to be going out much, so I'd expect him to still be anxious in public.
Right. That's right. Let's say in informing Larry David of this new script, we provide information that rules against or rules out agoraphobia, and now we're concerned about separation anxiety disorder. How do you differentiate separation anxiety disorder from both agoraphobia and social phobia? So the fear separates social phobia from agoraphobia. The fear of the performance versus the fear of not being able to escape in time. But what differentiates separation anxiety disorder from both of the above? It's pretty straightforward.
Isn't that the fear that something will happen? Fear that one will be gone.
Yeah. It's the actual fear of separation, right? So on shelf exams, there'll be information provided to you, whether or not the fear is where the individual is headed versus where they're separating from. That's a distinction you have to make clinically, right? And one of the ways in which you can do that, especially on an exam, is to provide you multiple scenarios. So if a person is fearful upon separating from primary caregiver in the morning when going to school, but that reaction is not seen when they separate and go to rec baseball, ballet lessons, play date, etc., then it's probably not separation anxiety disorder, because there's not that consistency. Because you're separating from the maternal figure or the primary caregiver, and in some instances, the anxiety isn't there. The other hint to this is that this condition, separation anxiety disorder, is actually a maladaptive evolution, transition from normal, age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate separation anxiety, which peaks around 18 months of age. So another little red flag on an exam that this might be separation anxiety disorder is that the person that presents to you is a child. And it's a child that is significantly older than 18 months. So usually about 9 years old or 11 years old. It's a hint. Not that it can't happen in adults, but that's another hint. Which means that choice D might be separation anxiety. So now you have choice A, social anxiety disorder, choice B, agoraphobia, choice C, separation anxiety disorder, and choice D, separation anxiety, which is completely normal. That's the normative. Any questions? All right, we're at the bottom of the hour. We'll call it. That will end our discussion of Seinfeld. And for those following at home, we have about 2-3 minutes to log off and log back on our second link for cable rounds. See you there.